It goes on, he says in verse 4, a wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. And he left them and departed. Jesus will give just one more sign to them that shows that he is the Son of God, the sign of the prophet Jonah. And the sign of the prophet Jonah is the resurrection. Just as Jonah was 3 days in the belly of the great fish, and then he emerged from the fish alive, Jesus will die on the cross, be buried for 3 days in the earth, and then be resurrected back to life. And so the resurrection will be the final sign that he gives them. Romans chapter 1, verse 4 says that Jesus was declared to be the Son of God by the resurrection. Now, I've pointed this out before, but please note that Jesus believed the story of Jonah in the Bible. He believed it was true. Jesus believed there really was a guy named Jonah, and he really was swallowed by a fish. Jesus believed all the Bible, and Jesus took the Bible literally. And if you're here and you're a Christian and you don't believe all the Bible is true, and you don't take it literally, well, you're in disagreement with Jesus about the Bible. And as I've said before, you both can't be right. One of you is wrong. And please don't come up to me after the service to try to argue about it. You need to talk to Jesus Christ. Your disagreement is with him. And after Jesus said this, he left them and he departed. Jesus doesn't like hanging around religious hypocrites. Jesus has provided all the evidence that is needed to come to the right conclusion about him, to put your faith in him for salvation. There are no more signs, there is no more evidence needed according to Jesus. He's given us plenty. Sometimes people will say things like, well, why doesn't God just write the gospel in the sky? Then I'll believe. Or why doesn't Jesus appear to me in my bedroom? That would convince me. Then I would believe. Well, Jesus has given us all the proof that we need. And sometimes people even kind of arrogantly say, well, if Jesus would just do this. Well, listen, we will stand before his throne and give an account of ourselves to him. Jesus will not stand before us and give an account to us. Jesus will not answer to us for the evidence that he has provided. We will answer to him for the evidence that he's provided. So verse 5 says, now when his disciples had come, so his disciples weren't there for this back and forth with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now they show up. Now when his disciples had come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. That would be the other side of the Sea of Galilee. When they had come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. If you remember the feeding of the 4,000 at the end of chapter 15, and they had 7 large baskets of bread left over, well, the disciples forgot to bring all that bread with them. Maybe there was a miscommunication among the disciples. I thought you were in charge of the bread. I thought you were in charge of the bread. Somehow they left all that bread behind. It's sitting on the dock over on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Then Jesus said to them, take heed. Now remember, they weren't there for the conversation with the Pharisees and Sadducees. Jesus says, take heed of and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have taken no bread. The disciples think Jesus is upset because they forgot the bread. And they think he's correcting them or he's rebuking them. And not only that, he's using some kind of parable to rebuke them. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And the disciples are thinking, what does that mean? What is he saying? I don't understand. He's upset about the bread, but what is he trying to tell us here? Well, verse 8, but Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, "O you of little faith, why do you reason among yourselves because you have brought no bread? Do you not yet understand or remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you took up, nor the 7 loaves of the 4,000 and how many large baskets you took up? How is it you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning bread, but to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees?" I love what he says in verse 11. How is it you do not understand? Well, how many times has Jesus wanted to say that to us? How do you not understand what I'm trying to tell you? Jesus was not talking about literal bread. He's not upset that they forgot all that bread. Jesus can miraculously make bread if he needs to. He's done that before. Which, by the way, how handy is that miracle, right? I mean, if you want a sandwich, boom, there's a sandwich. You don't have to get up and make it. You want some hummus and pita? Bam, there's some hummus and pita. I think of all the miracles, if I could just have one miracle, that would be the one I would want. Healing people, raising the dead, that's fine and all, but if I could just make food appear. I'm kidding, of course. I'm a Christian, so I have to say I would like to have healing or raising the dead. Verse 12 tells us he's speaking about the doctrine of the Pharisees and Sadducees, or the teachings of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And Jesus says that their teachings were like leaven. Leaven in the Bible is a symbol of something that corrupts. It's a corrupting influence. It corrupts something that is pure. The teachings of the Pharisees and Sadducees will corrupt the Word of God. Their teachings will corrupt your relationship with God. And what was the leaven of the Pharisees? Well, if you're taking notes, Luke chapter 12, verse 1 tells us very plainly. Luke 12, verse 1, Jesus said, "Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy." He tells us the leaven of the Pharisees is hypocrisy. Beware of the leaven of hypocrisy.